What is up, everybody? Welcome to Kyloe Un'Moo'Ted for September 2022. I am your host, Rob Mann. With me, I have the EVP of Kyloe, Mr. Luke Mattarano. Luke, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Rob.
Not a problem, and I appreciate you choosing the purple background to match my shirt today.
There
It
we
was a
go.
big win for my style and fashion awards here, and I appreciate you. Anyway, guys, most importantly, Luke has a big background in healthcare staffing, so we wanted to continue that trend. We did one with Raymond where we talked about 5 best practices of implementing Bullhorn for healthcare and some tips and tricks to get you set up for success. And then our team, minus me, unfortunately, went to Omaha. I really wanted a good steak, and I did not get it, unfortunately. But I did go whitewater rafting during that week, so I'm not complaining. But Luke went with our head of product consulting in the U.S., Brittany. And hot off that trip, we wanted to come in and continue to talk about healthcare staffing, especially as it pertains to automation, Bullhorn, and just technology in general. So, Luke, why don't you tell everyone your title and a little bit about your background so that you can get some context into uh, the fact that you've really been in the weeds here?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thanks for having me, Rob. Yeah, so my background is pretty diverse. I actually started in accounting and finance right out of school, and kind of migrated my way through consulting and various other things, and found my way to both healthcare and then healthcare staffing. And so one of the kind of continuous pieces through all of those that kind of connects them all together is technology. So it's really been an interesting journey. It's been a lot of fun, and right now, with coming off the back of COVID, there's a tremendous amount of need for efficiency, and technology's kind of been the engine that is pushing that along. So it's been great, and there's so much there to unpack as far as different organizations, different healthcare staffing companies, and what their focus is, and how technology can impact them in a multitude of ways. So I'm sure there's a bunch of different dynamics that are at play. My background really has been in the implementation of those technologies and how organizations kind of make those decisions on what they want to choose to put in their tech stack, what makes sense, and then how does that filter through the rest of the organization.
Yeah, and I mean, you came in and I thought kind of played the hero role, or at the end result, we're a hero in the
Right.
role. In the beginning, you might have been public enemy number one, but um, yeah. So you came into a large organization, and maybe uh, as the director of IT and the project manager for, I guess it was post imp, but like still implementation at that point, right? What are some of the things that you really kind of looked at to drive a good implementation? You don't have to give all of them. I know we've
Sure.
got some notes, and there's a lot, by the way. So,
Yeah.
what
No,
are those
you're
key things?
You're absolutely right. I was definitely public enemy number one when I came in. It was an implementation that wasn't obviously on track, wasn't on schedule. I'm sure many people out there have been a part of one, and it can be a little dicey at times. But the challenging dynamics within an organization that I faced was the company was getting rid of an incumbent system that they'd had, a CRM system they'd had for 10 plus years, that they'd taken and made a whole bunch of changes to, modifications, customizations. And we were changing out that system and putting in Bullhorn. And so there was a multitude of things that were at play. But a couple of the big ticket items that we ran into, that had to be kind of sorted out as we went through the process, was data migration. We talked about the integrations with the other applications that were running both on the front end and the back end of the system. One big dynamic that I think a lot of organizations miss when they're jumping into an implementation is change management. When you're implementing a new system and you're changing processes that people are going to have to follow, how do you train your people? How do you get them to participate in the process? So at the end of the day, they're as bought in as everybody else is as to what is going to happen. So there's a lot of pieces that we had to unpack. It obviously wasn't the smoothest of roads, but we did get to where we wanted to get to at the end, and it really helped me kind of get a much better perspective on both Bullhorn's dynamic and then the dynamics of all the other partners that are at play. So there's there's so many different pieces out there now for people and organizations to include or to at least think about including, and really reflecting on how that's going to impact the business. My background being in accounting and finance, I kind of approach everything from an ROI perspective. So we really kind of want to see how do we get the return out of the dynamic that we're putting into the business. And I would say that, staffing is difficult, but then you layer in healthcare staffing, which is its own unique animal. And I think it's really kind of a marriage between technology and the human side of it. I think that was one of the big things that drew me to healthcare staffing was the connection with people. And I think you find any organization that you go visit and that you talk to, and was part of the organization I was a part of, they really enjoy that human element, connecting with people. And I think one of the things we really had to get through and help them understand was that technology doesn't get in between that connection. It's really there to enhance that connection. So it's at the end of the day, we got where we needed to be, but and I learned a lot through the process. But yeah, it was a lot of fun at the end of the day.
By the way, you're describing the other podcast that I do, which is the You Own the Experience podcast. We talk about the intersection of people and technology and how technology is an amplifier. And that is the main focus of the show. Obviously, we do other stuff because we're getting closer to 100 episodes. But you just described the entire premise of our podcast. So I appreciate you. So if you haven't checked out the You Own the Experience podcast, Luke, just whatever you just said, like the whole talk track was what we talk about. Ongoing training, internal marketing to drive change management. You got to market to your team and tell them the why. But better than that, get them involved beforehand and get the field involved, get their buy-in, and then continue to train them and continue to evaluate and reevaluate. So with that said, you gave us some examples in the notes that you wanted to cover. And I'm going to make you go out of order, by the way. So
okay.
This is my least favorite thing. That's why I'm going to make you do it first. Customization.
Yes.
What are your thoughts and what are your experiences about customization, Luke?
Yeah, customization is definitely a double-edged or two-sided edged sword, if you will. It's there's some really powerful things that are fundamental to some businesses where they absolutely have to have that customization. And then as you push past that, you get into arenas of how necessary is the customization. And I think one of the big dynamics
That's a big question.
It's a huge dynamic that everybody runs into. And I think sometimes when people start down that path, they don't step back sometimes and look at what the unintended consequences are of some of this customization. And I think one of the big unintended consequences is just the complexity of your environment. I know with some of the companies I've helped, they created such a complex environment that it makes it very difficult and cumbersome for
to
them
untangle it. It's like the shoelace that you can't get done.
You can never get that knot, right? You can never get that knot out. And you can't, new partners try to come in and they try to bring their technology into your environment and they have difficulty because now we're trying to, pull it apart, but then you got to put it back together. So I think in certain cases where you have different lines of business, if you have locums and you've got travel nursing and you've got, travel allied, you need some different tracks, and those tracks, because of Bullhorn's ability, you can customize those. And I think you probably should, but I think at the same time, when you're sharing records, you're sharing candidate records, you're sharing company records. I think you really need to really make sure that what you are customizing is a needed customization and is not a not fluff, if you will.
One of the things we talk about often is like a lot of times people create customization because they want to recreate their old system that they're moving away from in their new system. And a lot of times we end up I make fun of it, but guys, don't do that. It's terrible, terrible reason. Like, you don't buy new technology. Like, think about all the processes you went to get to that new technology, to choose one. You went through a whole evaluation period. Hopefully you have a checklist, you have priorities, you did the evaluations, you did a bunch of metricing and kind of figured it out. Did a couple, like a reference call or two to see what was true, what was not, or what the pain points were that you didn't even know existed. But then think about on the product side, people who build products talk to customers. That's all they do. And then they go into dev, like there's a translator, usually the product manager, who translates the human into the technology. And ideally those things are built for your use cases or for the most generic use case. Uh, and it's built specifically from talking to customers. So if you're going to buy technology and then make it do something that your old technology did, it's not necessarily like, I don't know why you're buying something new. But anyway, that like, don't just think that they created something willy nilly. They might have, but for the most part, good products are built based on talking to customers and getting feedback like Luke's or mine or people who worked in the industry. So anyway, just a little soapbox moment. I'm going to put it away now, put my soapbox away.
Well, you're absolutely right on that front. I mean, that was a big hurdle. Everybody the question they kept asking was, why doesn't it do what the old system did? Why doesn't it do it the way we used to do it? And so, one of the things that we were able to kind of unpack is one of the pieces that was missed in the whole process was no one really explained to the users what the future state's going to look like. Everybody was very familiar with what the current state looked like because they were using the system and had used it for years. The future state, which is this new system, is going to be better in many respects, but it's also going to be slightly different. And I think that change management you talked about, Rob, and getting people to buy in, helping them understand, training them through the system so they understand those differences and how they impact their day-to-day in a positive way and not just it's different. So it's negative right out of the gate. But yeah, that's a huge piece of getting everybody together and making a successful implementation.
All right, so you got everyone's buy-in. You're pre-imp. You made a decision on where you're going to go with. You gave us a really funny story about data hygiene and duplicates. If you want to share that one.
Yeah, data hygiene. I'd say I'm sure everybody out there struggling with it. If you're on the the IT side or you're on the user side, I think data hygiene impacts really anybody that's using the system in some form or fashion. And so, one of the interesting dynamics that we ran into was, as as we were, well, I wasn't really part of the project at the time, but basically through the implementation, the best time to clean your data is pre-implementation. So before you do your data migration and move all your data over, that's really when you want to clean it. It's the easiest point in time to do that. Long story short, we weren't able to do that. All of a sudden, all this information comes into the new system. We go live, and all of a sudden, we have all these duplicates, right? We've got company records that are duplicated multiple times over because the spelling of different facility names are, somewhat unique, and people can't find them, so they just put it in again, and then they put it in again. On the candidate side, we had records that some had email addresses, some had phone numbers. So we've got multiple duplicates on that side of the equation as well. And so we implemented a VMS dashboard for our VMS business. And, all of a sudden we turn this thing on and it's going to start posting jobs to the right facilities. But because we have so many duplications of facilities, it just starts basically populating it. It's just everywhere, and everybody's freaking out because things aren't going where they're supposed to go. People are using some of the data that's incorrect and pushing forward with it because speed to market's obviously big. And so it just created this huge issue for that department. And it really was a key indicator for leadership that data hygiene is critical. And if you don't do something to not only fix it, but to continue to make sure that it's being cleaned, it can create some real problems down the road. So, that's one of the dynamics I know with Kyloe's, one of their products. I think it really needs to be a part of kind of maybe not every day, obviously, but at least a monthly or quarterly evaluation of your system. And it really kind of depends on how are you bringing data into your system. I know a lot of organizations that buy lists. I mean, even in these, even today in 2022, they buy lists of candidates, they buy lists, and they just upload them whole hog into the system. So I think you need to look at how you're bringing information in, and that should kind of dictate what controls and measures that you should have to try to make sure that you can really kind of keep that under control.
Yeah, so I'll add a couple things. So two, having good data is good for two reasons. One, if your recruiters run a search or your salespeople run a search and they find a bunch of bad data, it's pretty frustrating to their experience, and they are one of your customers. Two, easily what you said, right? Like mapping data to the wrong place, not getting them, like not being able to get the most juice out of this thing that you're paying for. And so I always say that your database is a crop field, right? If you don't take care of it, it might grow a bunch of things. Like right now we have a dead tomato plant in the back because it's not tomato season in South Florida. But for some reason, our jalapeno tree keeps providing at least one jalapeno a month. When normally, like when it fully, comes into harvest, it's got a bunch of jalapenos, but that thing magically does not need much care. So your database definitely needs the tomato care, which is why they're dead, and not the jalapeno care that is apparently unkillable. So thank you for that. Anyway, so that's that one. So duplicates, customizations, and then the last one, obviously something near and dear to my heart, Luke, automation. So why don't you share?
Yeah, so automations kind of dovetail with customizations to a degree, right? Because you're taking the system and you're automating some of the processes, which for the most part, when we were dealing with marketers and recruiters, they like automation. They want automation. They want to try to improve their efficiency, improve their speed. And I think all of those are very good reasons to implement automation. I think the challenge that you have is, what does that automation do as far as, what are the downstream effects of some of these automations? So it was really interesting because, the leadership within the organization looked at automation in one way, right? And that automation, that view was, how do we manage our marketers and recruiters? How do we make sure that they're doing what we want them to do in the timeframes that we want them to do them? But when you kind of flip to the other side and you looked at it from the marketers and recruiters perspective, they wanted automation to try to help with their day-to-day jobs. Like, what am I doing every day that's repetitive and that could be automated, that we could have a system so I'm not doing these manual tasks as often? It gives me more time to be on the phone, gives me more time to connect with my target audience. So I think both sides have equal excitement about automation. And I think one of the big challenges is, when you automate a process one direction, you've got to really be prepared for what that's going to deliver. And in one of the cases that we had, we were again focusing on kind of managing the recruiters in this particular context, and where they weren't performing, where they weren't contacting and having these quality interactions that we were looking for, they were losing ownership of these particular candidates. And so nobody likes that. That's a bad, but that was kind of an idea. And what ended up happening is, as these triggers were hit and these candidates were rolling, we were throwing them into just a bucket of just a general category of ownership. And all of a sudden, I don't think anybody realized just how many that would actually throw into that bucket. And all of a sudden we had thousands and thousands of candidates in this general bucket that now had no ownership, and we really had no real way of putting them back into play with the recruiters. So we definitely created our own problem. And so it was.
Well, we had the same. I mean, I worked at a locums company too, but as a recruiter. So one of my favorite searches was unassigned user, right? Mm-hmm. And then whose internal credentialing, right, was complete, and didn't have any assignments, and I would run that search all the time and call on it. So
yep.
Yeah, but if no one knows that thing exists, that goes back to like the education and the training. That was like a gold mine. These are easiest people, closest to the dollar, right? Like, they're already credentialed, no one owns them. Like, let's go get them. So anyway, we have a question from the audience. So
awesome.
Let me pull that up for you. I think you might know the asker.
What automation opportunities do you think there are that are specific to healthcare staff? So specific
to
specific to healthcare staff. I think one of the biggest automations is submittals. Like, how do you get your candidates submitted to the facility, right? Whether you're going through a VMS channel or whether you're going direct. I think speed, accuracy, and efficiency from a packet perspective is huge. How do you pull that together? How do you make sure you have everything in there that is needed for that opportunity? So there's definitely technologies out there that help you do that. Obviously, Kyloe has a tool that is, Awesome Docs is very good, very strong at not only pulling the information together, but helping you create that template so that that it's the way it needs to be every time it's done. So I think that's a huge potential for automation. I think the other side for healthcare specifically in the current climate that we're in is really the VMS side of the business. So it's the MSPs, it's these jobs that are out there that you really, if you're not in that business, I think you probably should think about getting in that business. But I think that's a huge opportunity for healthcare right now, because as we've kind of gone through this roller coaster of COVID, I think we see rates coming down now for travel nursing. We see rates coming down now for allied travel. And so I think things are going to start to settle a bit, after 24 months of chaos, if you will. And so I think this shift has really kind of pushed VMS as a much more robust area. And I think there's a ton of opportunity and automations around that arena. And I think that's a big dynamic for healthcare. I think one of the other pieces would also be within healthcare staffing, you have all the credentialing and licensing that you have to take care of. So I think, when we talk about candidate engagement, everybody's chasing the talent, everybody's chasing these individuals. And so I think to the extent that you can create better candidate engagement, you can make the process easier for them. You can remove those barriers so that you can get them credentialed, licensed, all that information's in the system, in an easier, more user-friendly fashion, I think is a huge advantage for organizations in healthcare staffing today.
Yeah, great. No, great. And I'll jump in too. I think if you think about, there's a Becker's report that came out yesterday that showed the pricing like going up in 5 states, or like the weekly pay for nurses going up and down in 5 states, vice versa. It goes back to the experience. So if you can automate things, whether it's internal notifications to your team or external communications to drive a better experience, create a better feeling interacting with your recruiters or brand, I gotta say that. So if you're not using automation, to your point, right, where your leadership team didn't want to use it for engagement. If you're not using it on, like, you got post hire, you got redeploy,
Yep.
You got re-engage, passive candidates. But the experience that you can drive through automation, and this is true, and Bullhorn talks about this all the time now for their automation tool. You can amplify what your best recruiter does to drive that experience that they give, to drive the referrals that they get, because they're getting referrals. And if you can do that in the travel space successfully, then you're going to have a lot of success. And guys, it's only going to get more competitive. You guys were growing like weeds during the pandemic, and now we start to see pricing come down. So if things start to stabilize, what is your differentiator? It's the experience that your team drives. So I gotta say, experience management through automation. So anyway, well, Luke, thank you so much for sharing the stories. It was great getting to have you on. Guys, if you ever have any need for any help with healthcare staffing, at least on the technology side, obviously we would love for you to think of Kyloe. But we also have resources like Luke, whose sole job it is to consult and help you guys think about the way you use technology for healthcare staffing. So if you didn't know, now you know. And Luke, thank you so much. Any kind of last word?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Thank you, Rob, for having me. And if I can help anybody in any way, don't hesitate to reach out.
All right. Thanks, guys.